In today's show, for the second time in less than 2 weeks, the Blazers are rumored to be interested in trading up in the draft. What might it look like, and is this a good idea? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, another rumor connecting the Trailblazers to having interest in trading up in the draft. Is Portland chasing another top 10 pick armed with 2 lottery picks? Do they want to sweeten the pot and end up with 2 picks in the top 10? According to one report, yes. We'll talk about that. It's not the first time we've heard this, something like this. We shall also discuss what the packages might look like. Like what is a realistic trade package when you hear like the Blazers want to trade up, right? What are their realistic paths? I think there's 2 distinct ways they could approach it, and I'll talk about that in the second segment. And then like there seems to be, whether this happens or not, there seems to be a little bit of maybe the smallest of small fires connected to this smoke, and I want to just kind of put my cards on the table. Is this a good idea? Is this the right approach for this draft, for this team, for this month? Let's get into it in today's show. We got 2 weeks, as you're listening to this, less than 2 weeks from the draft. It is you are listening to Thursday, June 13th show. Less than 2 weeks away from the NBA draft. It's lying season. Let's just put that out there to begin with. This is the time of year that you hear things that are intentionally untrue because folks, and particularly agents this time of year, are putting out stuff that is particularly untrue. But I don't think what I'm about to tell you here necessarily falls in that category for some reasons that I will break down for you. Kevin O'Connor, veteran NBA reporter who writes for The Ringer and is a podcaster for The Ringer and a couple different shows, on The Ringer's NBA draft show that published on Wednesday, June 12th. He said that the Blazers are among 3 teams that he has heard who are interested in trading up into the draft, either to get into the lottery or in the case of a couple of the Blazers getting a second top 10 pick. He says that he's hearing that Cleveland, Toronto, and the Blazers are all the teams that are interested in trading up in the draft. Toronto has a pick in the teens, obviously. Cleveland and their 2, and the Blazers are at 7 and 14. Teams that are interested in trading up into this draft. And I do think there is, in general, and I think this happens often this time of year, and maybe it happens all the time in sort of the new world of media, is that when someone who is not the sort of typical news broker reports some intel, people discredit it on face value by virtue of it not being from a source they prefer to hear from, right? This ain't Woj, get out of here. This ain't my guy Shams, I don't want to hear it. And I think that's sort of the poison of modernity, but I also think there is that certain people break stories for certain reasons, right? And that's kind of this sort of media literacy that you have to develop on your own, dear listener. Also, just judging by my text messages from my friends, I don't think Blazer fans love Kevin O'Connor. I think he's been a little bit harsh about the team and the reality that they've faced over the last few years, and people don't care for his coverage, right? So when he says this stuff, it's like, it can't be true. I dismiss this whole cloth. I wouldn't. And here's why I wouldn't. Because I'm old enough to remember 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Jonathan Givony of ESPN reported that the Blazers were among the 3 teams interested in trading up with Houston for the number 3 pick in the draft. Those 3 teams at the time included Chicago, Portland, and Memphis, who had expressed some interest, or at least had put out some feelers to see what a trade would look like. This doesn't mean the Blazers are going to make a trade or going to trade up in the draft, but when 2 independent media companies, totally separate reporters that do not report the same things, have it that the Blazers have shown interest in trading up in the draft, it just has to be true that they've shown interest in trading up in the draft. Sometimes this stuff leaks out because, say, Houston, in the case of ESPN's report that came out on June 1st, it's like, Houston has maybe interest in driving up the price. Oh, we've heard from all of these teams. So at the time, it's like, yeah, hey, maybe this is, I'm not saying that it's false, but there's a reason why it would be out there. But when two different reporters say that it's there, I think it's pretty clear that the Blazers, if nothing else, are putting out feelers. Now, that doesn't mean that they have accelerated to the point where they are talking deal, right? I think there is kind of like a NBA 2Kification. NBA 2Kification is the word that I'm trying to make up poorly on the spot here, where not all trade talks are like, here's the trade package, take it or leave it, right? Some of it is exploratory calls. It's been explained to me that in the past by members of NBA front offices, like that you say, are you trying to take on money? Are you trying to shed money? Or do you want players? Do you want picks, right? You say, oh, okay, well, if we were to make a trade for the 6th pick in the draft, like say it's Charlotte or whatever, we'd actually like to like to add future picks. We're not interested in adding veteran players. We want to add future picks. Or if you're talking with Houston, they're like, oh, we want to add veterans, but we would prioritize some picks. But here's kind of what we're looking for. But we're not super interested in first rounders into the future because we have those. We need like players that can play, and so you kind of get a baseline for deals. So the idea that the Blazers have it's being rumored from multiple sources that the Blazers have had separate, at least in certain situations. I don't know if they're separate or this is the same thing that two reporters are hearing, but in certain situations, the Blazers have explored the idea of trading up. It makes sense to me that it's like, you do your due diligence. So this is what the Blazers are doing. This is what you want them to do. You want them to explore all of the avenues. The Blazers are at 7-14. They're in an incredibly crucial summer. The next two summers are incredibly crucial for the Blazers for the health of the franchise. If they're going to get out of hell, they need to get the next two summers right. That's going to be a theme of this podcast for a long time, right? It's like they got to get the stuff right. So exploring what that looks like, what right looks like, is incredibly important to them. What would a trade package, if we want to move up in the draft, we being the royal we of the Portland Trail Blazers, if we're sitting at 14 and some veterans to dangle, or 14 and some second round picks, what does that trade look like? Where can we get to? And if we get to, what does our intel say is still going to be on the board? You're trying to figure all of that out during lying season. But I think, like I said, I think this smoke is like the very, very, very faint embers of a campfire that an irresponsible camper did not quite put out. It's real. It may have been burning at some point. It could easily be burning again, but right now it's just very clear that the Blazers, if nothing else, have been making calls. They've been doing the job of running a basketball team. So if they're doing the job of running a basketball team, what the hell does it look like? What does this look like? Let's talk about what it could look like. I want to offer two trades that are kind of the different routes I believe the Blazers could go, and I'll go specifics because I know people love fake trades, and I'm good. I've cooked up some fake ones, some sort of fake ideas, fake parameters that kind of explain where I think the two directions, if the Blazers are indeed considering trading up, what it could look like in two different scenarios. Join me to hear those scenarios in the second segment. First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Game Time. It's the place for last-minute tickets. It's the app that rewards procrastinators. If you're considering going to a game, well, use Game Time to get up to 60% off on last-minute tickets. This summer, the Portland Timbers and the Portland Thorns, they're in action at Providence Park. They're in beautiful Northwest Portland. It's a wonderful place to catch a game in the summertime. They're actually both out of town this weekend, which gives you even more time to procrastinate and get some deals on the Game Time app. So the Thorns will be back in town, not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday afterwards. That is the 23rd, so the week after Father's Day. Shout out to my dads out there, and my dad. Shout out to you, Dad. But not this Sunday, but the next Sunday, which gives you a whole bunch of time, 10 days to procrastinate. You can go see the Thorns play the Kansas City Current, and it's $31 to get into the building on deals. $42 to sit downstairs. If you want to sit on the club side, there's tickets for as cheap as $64 to sit on the east side of the stadium, in the new part of the stadium. Like, This is what Game Time does. They reward you for taking your time. So you don't have to rush out and do it today, but go ahead and download the Game Time app. Check out the deals for yourself where you want to go. Here's how it works. It helps you take the guesswork out of buying tickets. You just download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, get $20 off your first purchase. Okay, terms apply. Create that account, then use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right. So the Blazers clearly are at least considering a trade up, or if nothing else, exploring what the market might look like. I think it is when multiple reporters report something similar, I think it's undeniable that it's probably happening. The extent to which it is happening is up for debate, and maybe not even up to debate, just completely unclear to us from the outside. But I think it's very clear that the Blazers are at least making calls, doing the exploratory work to see what it would look like. I'm going to pitch you two deals that I think are kind of the two different routes they could go here, and then we'll close the show talking about whether I think this is the right move or not. But let's kind of get into the specifics of the hypothetical, and then unpack it a little bit. On a show earlier this offseason with Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets, we discussed a hypothetical trade about the Blazers moving up from 7 to 3, and it was centered around Malcolm Brogdon going to Houston. And when Jackson and I were discussing that, we ended up not finalizing a deal. Neither of us liked the package. We didn't want to give stuff up, but it was kind of like the type of thing you talk about in June that maybe you revisit in early June, that you revisit in late June or on draft night when things get serious. I think it was a sort of good use of the exercise. But let's say I think that's kind of the first route. The Blazers use a veteran player who's not going to be part of the sort of long-term core. And I think Malcolm Brogdon seems to be the most tradable, most obvious trade piece on the roster. Use that as your starting point. So you kind of not get out from under, but you move on from a veteran to prioritize, playing time for your young guards, and also allow you to draft other young guards into the future, kind of clear up some of your decision making by getting rid of a good player in Malcolm Brogdon and getting rewarded for doing so. But I'm going to pitch a slightly different trade, because if we're following the sort of Kevin O'Connor reporting, the Blazers don't want to trade up from 7 and end up with like 3 and 14. They want 2 top 10 picks because they've got their eyes on folks. So I'm going to pitch this. Malcolm Brogdon, 14 and 34. That's the Blazers' first pick in the second round in exchange for Jock Landale and Jeff Green and 3. If the Rockets balk, you offer them either 40 in this draft or a future second round pick, and you say, that's our sweetener, that's what we've got, and we're giving you the best player in the draft, a functional player that's going to help your young guards. Like, yeah, I think you could argue that Malcolm Brogdon's like better than Jalen Green. Might not be that way for long, and I'm not even sure I would make that argument, but he's effective. He would be he'd be able to play, and they want to be competitive because they don't own their draft picks. Familiarity with Ime Udoka, you're getting an upgrade in the backcourt for very little cost. The Blazers end up with veteran Jeff Green, who I really like. If you're going to add a guy in the late 30s, how about a guy in the late 30s who knows how to play in the league, offered some veteran leadership, and doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective, and probably doesn't even need to play a whole bunch of minutes to offer you some value. And Landale is like insurance center on a team that has a lot of insurance centers, but he has a non-guaranteed contract, I believe, for the next 2 seasons beyond this upcoming one. So 3 more heading into this season. Imminently tradable if another team needs him. You could just go ahead and flip him if you don't, if he's not in your immediate plans and you want to just play Duop Reith and bank on Rob Williams or whatever it is. It's relatively low cost for the Blazers. That's one route, right? That's one route. That is the trade a player route. You end up with 3 and 7, and you allow, I think, talk about this more in the third segment, but you have yourself a chance to make 3 of the first 7 picks in this draft. You'll be the first team to draft twice because you'll be effectively leapfrogging the Spurs, who have 4 and 8. You'll be the first team to make 2 choices, and you'll probably have I guess a higher hit rate. Hard to know. Hard to know. At least less folks making decisions in front of you. That's one route. You trade Malcolm Brogdon, you move up in the draft. Not 100% sure that gets done, but that's a framework of one idea. The Rockets are rumored to be interested in trading that pick back. There's some value. They still end up with the 14th pick in the draft. They might be able to hit that pick if there's somebody they like in that range. Bing, bang, boom. That's one route. The other route is just straight picks. And I think this is more of a team like Memphis. So you come a calling to Memphis with 14 and 34 to move up to 9. And Memphis says, that's a lot. We don't want to move back 5 spots. We could use another second round pick because we're a relatively expensive roster, and second rounders are going to help us build out the roster in the future. And even our sort of young players, like we don't know what to do with Zaire Williams and Santi Aldama. Like maybe we need to sort of reset our young back half of the rotation types. And they've been pretty good on the margins, Vince Williams and Gigi Jackson to note. So it's like, even though Memphis has 39 in this draft, they say, okay, we'll take 34 too. But if they don't, you say either 40 in this draft. I don't think they want 3 second round picks in this draft. Maybe they do. If not, you say, okay, a future second rounder of your choosing. 2 seconds, 14 to move up to 9. That's the other route, right? It is, you don't cash in your veteran. You don't, instead of using a player to move up maybe further in the draft, you just move up to 7 and 9, right? You end up with 2 picks in the sort of in that mid-late lottery range. You get, you might be able to leapfrog some guys if you're worried, like, okay, we can use more specifics here. It's like, okay, at 7, we're going to take Tijan Salon because we know he's not going to fall past San Antonio at 8. But at 9, this gives us an opportunity to go get, say, like a Dalton Connect, who we know won't be there. Like Memphis would take him, and he won't drop past 10. And it's like we want that upside swing in Salon, but we also want like a functional 23-year-old shooter who could help like at least make the offense easier in like, I don't know, like immediately. It's hard to know how good Dalton Connect's going to be as a rookie, but like theoretically helps much earlier in his career and could be useful. Could be useful in the fall as opposed to someone that you need to be a little more patient on, like an upside swing like Salon. So I think that's the other route, right? Is that you don't trade players. You specifically say, okay, we're just swapping picks. Maybe 14 to 9 is a little too aggressive in that area, and maybe that's. That might be somewhat wishful thinking, but I'm offering some sort of ideas. I think in general, the notion is that after the top 2 picks, which mostly are, when you look at mock drafts from the folks in the know, are mostly either Zachary Reese-Haché or Alexander Sarr in some order, and then it's like wide open from there. There's folks who have Klingon up that high. There's folks who have Machis Buzelis up that high. There's, I think before the ACL injury, Nikola Topic was often in the top 3. Like, it's pretty wide open. So if a team, maybe Memphis says like, yeah, we'll take 2 first because we know we're going to get our guy. Like if he's on, or it's like we agreed to the trade, we'll draft for you, assuming that now we know. Because we've done our intel, we know we're going to get who we want at 14. We're not worried. Plus, we really like a couple guys in that early second round range, and if we move up from 39 to 34, now we're cooking. I think those are the two, sort of broadly speaking, the 2 approaches. I think I kind of spoiled some of the logic here, right? But if the draft is relatively flat, and if there is a lack of consensus, why trade up? Why trade up? I think that's the question, right? Like if especially if like, well, this team's not going to take a big and we want a big, or this team's definitely going to take one of, Rob Dillingham's on the board and we're not interested in Dillingham, or Nikola Topic's on the board and we're not interested in Topic. Like we can, if we only trade up to, I think another one that I had considered was trading up with Utah, but I don't think, just looking at the roster, I don't think Utah necessarily needs Brogdon. Like he doesn't make a ton of sense for them because they already have Colin Sexton and they already have Keontae George and they already have Jordan Clarkson. Obviously, Utah could do some other things that makes it more valuable. In theory, they could trade for Jeremy Grant, but I don't see like a super duper clean fit, although like they've played Lauri Markkanen a bunch at the small forward over the last couple seasons. It's fine. They can pencil him in there even now. Like if they were to play Walker Kessler and John Collins together, then Lauri's playing small forward there too. So like, but I don't see an easy one with Utah and trading up to 10. I don't think it's super obvious there, but I think those are the 2 routes. You use a veteran to maybe move up a little bit higher because you're offering some real quality, or you find someone and then that would allow you to get up in that 3-ish range. I don't think the Washington, Detroit, or Charlotte would want to trade for a vet. So if you're trading with them, you're trading picks. And like, I think there's that, you end up in that Washington's at 2. I don't think you're going to jump all the way up there, but like 5 with Detroit and 6 with Charlotte. I think there's a world in which the Blazers explore trades for them. I think there's a Jeremy Grant reunion idea floating around with Detroit, although I'm not sure I love that trade package necessarily, but all of this is to say, like, the framework of all of these things, including the 2 specifics that are offered, like the vet route or the just picks route. Is this a good idea? Like, is this something they should do? Let's talk about the logic of it and what it means if they do pursue this path for the Blazers. That's what we'll do to close the show. Join me in the third and final segment, won't ya? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. It's also the #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million members. It's the most fun, exciting way to get on the action while you're watching your favorite sports and your favorite players all summer long. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and get a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. So whether that's Major League Baseball all summer long, the MLS, whether you're watching the Thorns and the Kansas City Currents and the NWSL, whatever that looks like, you can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. And if you're looking for promos, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select players' stat projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chance of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. They'll match you dollar for dollar on your first deposit up to $100 when you download the app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA. It's Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. I think I've been pretty consistent in my opinion that I would not chase trading up in this draft. I wouldn't do it. But I don't have all the info. So the Cliff Notes version of the first 2 segments of this thing is like, no, I don't think it's a good idea. No, I don't. On my face value, I've kind of joked that I'm like a low information, strong opinion haver in this draft, but like, no, I don't think this draft is strong enough, and there's no specific prospect that appeals to me from my seat here in my very own basement that I say, yeah, you gotta do it. Cash Malcolm Brogdon and get to 3. Like, Donovan Clingan doesn't do it for me like that. Like, I'm not like, he's gonna be Rudy Gobert except with a hip American haircut. Like, he's big. I think he's probably gonna be pretty good on defense. I don't know that I would chase him. But I am operating under the assumption that the Portland Trail Blazers know a lot more than me. So I'll say 2 things. One, I don't like the Malcolm Brogdon route necessarily. I don't hate it. But like, I think it's fine. But I would be hesitant to trade away players on the roster who I think have standalone trade value to trade up in this draft that is perceived, and I hold this perception as well, as a relatively weak draft class. When I read the scouting reports and watch some YouTube videos, I think like every one of the players that are kind of in the Blazers draft range, in that 7 and 14 range, are flawed, and you are really hoping that you get it right. And there aren't players at the top of the draft. And I think this is the real key here. Is like, there's no one at the top of the draft. Let's say like, okay, well, if you get in this range, you're guaranteed to get something or other, right? You're guaranteed to get, a guy who has a chance to make multiple All-Star teams. I don't, certainly there'll be impact players in this draft, but where those impact players land, who freaking knows? And so that's when, if you are in favor of this route, I think the why you would be in favor of it is you trust the Blazers decision makers. You say, listen, if they see someone they love at 9, striking that deal with Memphis and making the selections at 7 and 9, give them a chance to get it right. Or if they, strike the deal with Houston, these are again hypotheticals I made up, if you were to make those deals, if they get up to 3 and they get the guy they want, that is, you trust them to get it right, to get that part correct and move from there. That would be why you're in favor of it. I think in general, like I said, like I'm in favor of the Blazers trading many of their veteran players. They're allowed to acquire veteran players. You'll notice that in the Brogdon trade, I have them acquiring Jeff Green. I don't think every single player on the roster needs to be 22 years old. But I do think that it would be more valuable if they had the veterans they had were less sort of like ball dominant offense first guys, and they could kind of clear the runway a little bit to still have the veteran presence and all the value that like institutional knowledge in the NBA brings, but not maybe dudes who need to play 22 minutes and dribble a bunch, because that's maybe not the most valuable on-court development. Also, they could use maybe some shooters with those vets too, because they could use some shooting in these lineups. Does Jeff Green solve that? No, he does. He does not. Obviously, maybe not. Obviously, he does not. So, like, while I'm in favor of them trading vets, does Malcolm Brogdon have more value than being able to cashing in, jumping from, I think that particular trade, you're trading 14 and 34 and maybe another future second. I think you would have value there. If it's like the sort of the rumored, if it's packaging multiple picks to move up to 3, if it's 7 and 14 to move up to 3, I hate it. If it's like 7 to move up to 3, I'm not super in favor of it. If it's many vets, Matisse Thybulle, Jeremy Grant combos, Rob Williams, Anthony Simons combos, I don't think I love that either. Because I think the standalone value of the trade of potential trades that you could get from Malcolm Brogdon or Jeremy Grant or Anthony Simons or any combination of that 3 might yield you more value in the long run than jumping up in this particular draft. Because again, it is noted to be a relatively weak class. And as I continue to learn about these prospects, I am not enamored. That's my personal opinion. But I don't think that alone makes this like disqualifying bad. Like, I don't think this is capital B bad, because my personal opinion is that I'm wary of it. I don't even, it's like, I wouldn't do it, but I don't get to do it anyways. I'm wary of that decision making. It doesn't, it's not a great path in my eyes. But I know this, and I believe it so strongly. The Blazers have to get these next 2 summers right. So if they know that, say, like Salah and Topic, or I don't know, Reed Shepherd and Donovan Clingan, or Ron Holland and Zach Edey are the guys, right? And that like, and you can only get them. I think Edey's maybe a bad example because he's gonna be deeper in the draft. But it's like, if you think the best path forward, the way that you're going to be good, is if you absolutely end up with Donovan Clingan and Dalton Knecht, and the way to do that is to cash in some assets. So you're picking at 6 and 7 back to back. So there's no interference anywhere. They have to do it. I don't know who's the impact player who's going to hit in this draft. There's probably 2 or 3 of them. There's, I think the history of the draft suggests that there's probably one dude who makes the Hall of Fame in this draft class and a couple All-Stars. One of that All-Stars is also probably the Hall of Famer, but like, even the worst drafts ever yield some talent. 2013 yielded Rudy Gobert and Giannis Antetokounmpo and CJ McCollum, who's pretty good. I think the 2017 draft was a huge mess, but like, you get Jason Tatum at 3, and then the teens yielded Donovan Mitchell and Bam Adebayo. And do not look into the Blazers' specific draft history regarding that draft and trading up if you want to have positive vibes. But like, and I don't think like they traded up once, so it always goes wrong. Like, the idea is that if you trust the decision makers in the front office, making the move this time of year is like, you have to get this draft right. You're probably gonna be really bad again next year, and you have to get 2025 that draft right. You have to get these summers correct, and you probably have to get the drafts correct. There are ways out of the gutter for teams in the Blazers situation that aren't just nailing draft picks, but it only gets you back to the middle if you just nail a couple trades. The way that they get back into being like seriously competitive with a 4 to 6 year window is nailing the draft. Perhaps they already have, and Shaden Sharp and Scoot Henderson are going to pop, and it's going to feel very different next year. But I think like right now we don't know, and they're going to be, they're a team that's going to have 2 lottery picks, and perhaps if they go this route, 2 top 10 picks, and they're probably going to be picking it towards the top of the lottery again next season. I don't think I would go the trade up route, but if they do, they have to get it right. It is imperative that they get it right, or the cycle is just going to continue forever. And there's no good way out. If you miss on the draft and you are bad, and then you are back in the draft. There's no magic elixir to get out of there. Fans will say tanking doesn't work. Well, what if you are just bad by incompetence? Then it'll be the same outcome as tanking, functionally. And you know how you'll save yourself from that hell? You will draft correctly. You'll nail a draft pick and get out of there. Whether you chase the middle or chase the bottom, the way to get back to above the middle is to nail the draft. If you're, 95% of the league that isn't involved in signing stars and free agency and is not destinations where players demand to be traded to. I don't know if trading up in the draft is the right process. I personally think it's not, but the Blazers have much stronger, the Blazers front office, much stronger, understanding of the breadth of the draft, the prospects, and the direction this team wants to go. So I will say that I defer to them in this world, right? If they value the move, so be it. But you can't get it wrong. You cannot turn 3 picks into Zach Collins and Caleb Swanigan, because you know what happened? It ruined the back half of Damian Lillard's career. It will be a long time in the desert if you get it wrong. These are the 2 summers to get it right. They've set themselves up to be high lottery selectors in 4 consecutive drafts. You got to come away with players that anchor the foundation. And if trading up anchors the foundation, that's the move. That's going to do it for today's show. Come back for tomorrow's show. You're not going to want to miss this one. A rare week where we're going to have 3 interviews. Tyler Metcalf of No Ceilings is going to join the program on Friday's show. That's what we do here. 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. We're ramping up towards the NBA draft. Less than 2 weeks away as you are listening to this. Tell your friends about the program. I say this a lot, but I sincerely mean it. This is the Blazer podcast that is coming out 5 days a week. You're not getting this anywhere else. So if you made it this deep into the show, tell a friend about the program and then come back for tomorrow's show. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.